Question is, are Democrats ready to finally cast off, once and for all, any worry about being labeled soft on crime, especially in an election year? And are there enough reform-minded Republicans to enact a serious criminal justice overhaul? For that, I want to bring in David Friedlander from the Daily Beast, Jackie Kucinich from the Washington Post. They're both back with us. Daphne Linzer, she's the managing editor at MSNBC.com, who's reporting prompted an investigation into the case of Clarence Aaron, whose sentence was commuted by President Obama last week, and Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York City. And Daphne, I'll start with you because maybe we could add a little context to these 8 pardons that Obama issued last week. 6 of them were serving life sentences. All 8 of them had been serving for 15 years plus. A lot of this has to do with reforms that have been made in the last few years that, had they been in place when these people were originally sentenced, would never had them in jail for as long as they've been. Can you tell the story that you wrote this week? Sure,
you're right. These are people who everyone agrees are serving sentences that no one thinks they should be serving anymore. And the story of Clarence Aaron, somebody like him, this was a tragedy right from the beginning. This was a person who was involved in a drug conspiracy, as you said. It was the early 90s, the height of the drug war. He wasn't the buyer, the seller, the user, the supplier, the dealer. He was maybe the lowest guy on the scene, and he got a triple life sentence. He was a college student, a star linebacker at Southern University. And he went to prison. And as soon as that sentence came down, I mean, it outraged people on the left and the right, even when it happened. And he became a great candidate for presidential mercy, for a commutation. And his process started. He applied for a commutation. He had tremendous support from Republicans and Democrats, from great lawyers who worked pro bono on his case, were for free. And, you know, it moved along the chain. And even President Bush, by the time it got to him in office, you know, almost a decade after he applied, that White House was very interested in commuting his sentence. One person stood in his way, and that was the pardon attorney, a guy named Ron Rogers, who's still there today. You know, this is an executive power. This is the president's only unfettered power, is to issue pardons and commutations. Ron Rogers is a pretty strong guy. He misled the White House. He didn't give the White House the full information it needed. He didn't tell them that Clarence Aaron had the support of the sentencing judge, had the support of the U.S. attorney, who was a Bush appointee at the time, and Clarence Aaron's case was denied.
And we're talking about, to be clear, in a lot of these cases, part of the story here is that the power to sentence has been taken away, legislatively has been taken away from judges with mandatory sentences. With this era of tough-on-crime politics in the 80s and the early 90s, when crime rates were soaring, and Congress and state legislatures passed all these laws that basically said, hey, if you're found guilty of this crime, this is the sentence you're going to serve no matter what the judge says.
That's right, and it was an important point that the president made after he signed the commutations and issued a separate statement saying that even the judges had complained for years that they were forced to hand down sentences that they just didn't believe in, that they truly believed were unjust. And that was the case for Clarence Aaron also. I wrote the story talking about how this pardon attorney had blocked Clarence Aaron's quest for clemency. A new review was ordered by the Obama administration. An Inspector General's report looked into the case and confirmed the findings, and Clarence Aaron had his sentence commuted by President Obama, which is great.
And Congressman, the thing that jumped out to me most about the politics of this week is when these 8 pardons, these commutations were announced, there was not an outcry from Republicans on Capitol Hill. They were given a chance by the news reporters who reported on this week to have a comment. They declined to comment. And I'm thinking back to, 15, 20, 25 years ago, the Republican playbook in politics was never, ever, ever miss a chance to say, the Democratic politician X is soft on crime because he pardoned somebody, because he commuted a sentence, because he said maybe we were a little too harsh in this case. And it seems like maybe, just as we're saying, Democrats may be shaking off some of that old fear, Republicans may be shaking off that playbook a little bit.
Well, in this era of intense partisanship, actually one of the opportunities for bipartisan progress is in the area of criminal justice reform. And if you were to flash back 20 years ago, it would be hard to imagine that in fact would be the case. But indeed, what we've seen in states all across the country, particularly red states, such as Texas, Georgia, South Carolina, is pretty significant criminal justice reform and rolling back the tough-on-crime legislation, the mandatory minimums that have resulted in mass incarceration in these states, as they have all across the country. This has been led, in fact, in some instances, by Republican conservative members of these legislative bodies, out of recognition, perhaps, that the toll and the cost on the economy and on the budget is too severe. and that the actual benefits of this mass incarceration don't justify the level of cost that has been imposed on society in terms of lost economic productivity, lost human capital. Interestingly enough as well, in the Congress, in the intensely partisan House of Representatives, on a Judiciary Committee, which is a source of constant conflict, whether that's on gun rights or reproductive rights or immigration rights, I'm part of a bipartisan task force on overcriminalization, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, that was put together this year to tackle the issue of overcriminalization, mass incarceration, out-of-control sentencing that has occurred at the federal level. And so I'm very hopeful that in this climate we'll actually be able to get something done. And President Obama, with these commutations, I think has set the stage for congressional action next year.
See, there are a couple of areas, I think, where you could see potentially, if the bipartisanship on this is real, where you could see congressional action next year. One is Durbin and Mike Lee. Mike Lee, the Tea Party type from Utah, have put together what they call the Fairer Sentencing Act. And it would basically take, I think there's close to 10,000, something like 8,000 to 10,000 people in federal prison right now who are similar to the people that President Obama pardoned this week, who, if all of the new guidelines, all of the new laws that are in place now had been in place at the time, they wouldn't have gotten the sentences they're getting. So basically it would create an opportunity to make all the changes that have been made retroactive. And you see that Dick Durbin and Mike Lee teaming up on this. Rand Paul has introduced this thing, the Safety Valve Act of 2013.
Senator Patrick Leahy is also.
And Pat Leahy's this. You're seeing these bipartisan. It's really amazing to me because we spend so much time talking about red-blue divide and just, Republicans won't do it if Obama's for it, and we're seeing that just break down here. And is the Republican motivation on this purely one of cost? It's such all this incarceration is such a drag on the state budget, whether it's Texas or South Carolina, any other state. You've locked all these people up, and then you got to pay for it. And they say, "Whoa, wait a minute, we don't want to do that."
It's $6.5 billion that the Bureau of Prisons got last year, so that is a big part of it. It is costing a lot of money, but yeah, it is one of these bright spots of bipartisanship that we're seeing in Congress right now, which really does create some optimism for next year.
Is there just an admission here too that collectively we got it wrong 20 years ago? We got it wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think to your point, anybody who lived through the presidential campaign could never imagine this moment. And it's hard to know what's going on if we just run out of prison beds or what the deal is. But it seems as if at the same time these measures are so halting, and I don't know what actually explains that. I mean, commuting the 8 sentences as President Obama did, or Jerry Brown's 120 or whatever it is, including some of them who already served their time. I mean, we still aren't seeing federal law changing, I think, quite yet.
Yeah, and that's the question. We'll get into a little bit more.